Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition, here to give you a quick recap about what went down at the school board meeting last night in Minneapolis. How are you doing this morning, Heather?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I woke up with the sun up. It's, that's all you can ask for the middle of December. But yeah, so let's get into it. Heather, do you want to give us a quick recap of what happened last night?
Yeah, so last night was a budget meeting. It was the last board meeting, even though there's one more committee of the whole meeting next week. It was the last budget meeting or board meeting of this year. And we heard public comment. We heard several people calling to talk about their concerns regarding literacy and the literacy data that we saw in last month's meeting. We also had members of our coalition calling and talking about equitable distribution of teachers. That's something that we've been trying to bring awareness to over the last few weeks. It was a long presentation on the budget and the pro forma and a lot of numbers. And some parts of the meeting felt a little like a roller coaster, like, oh, this is good. And oh my gosh, oh no. So we'll get into that more later. We did learn that we are in fund balance compliance, which is an incredible thing. And then we heard a lot about the legislative agenda for Minneapolis Public Schools coming up. So yeah, that was kind of the bulk of it. It was a heavy information meeting.
Yeah, for sure. I was finally able to start to understand elements of the budget, which honestly is, I think, such credit to our finance staff and our finance leader in Minneapolis, Senior Officer Giap. Just very excited about, finally being able to understand it and also being able to understand it in such a crucial moment for MPS. And so, we wanted to show our slide of the night. This is again from the budget presentation. And as you can see here, these were some of the key findings that I thought really stood out from the presentation last night. And so there are a couple of things that you can see. We have, I think the big headline was that enrollment is not going to be the solution for our budget issues. And that ended up being the real talking point that people focused on last night in terms of the board discussion, because I think the board is starting to get a little frustrated. Just hearing from community and hearing from folks around how everyone's leaving MPS and the board and the district need to do more to recruit students so that we can have more money. And they're saying no, like that's not the only reason why we're in this issue. But then that's about the only place where they agree. And then it seems to be that things start to diverge in other directions in terms of the priorities. And so, Heather, anything from this slide really stick out to you?
I mean, I think, it's kind of this constant tug and pull, right, for us, because we know that our district is underfunded from a state. And yet what I heard last night was like, it doesn't seem like that reality is possible to change. And I know that all things can change, but during that legislative agenda update, I did not hear a lot of hope for that. So then it kind of makes me feel like, so this feels like our reality and now we have to live within it. It was interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, do we want to transition to our most valuable moment and our do better moments from last night?
Yeah, so my most valuable moment was just how squeaky clean our audit was. I know that
very nerdy, most valuable moment, by the way.
I mean, yeah, but also you can't make that fun or anything like that. But I know that our district doesn't have a history of strong financial decisions and being fiscally responsible. And I really, when I heard those words and just the way that there were very few findings, minor tweaks, almost nothing. And I just was like, gosh, our district does not deserve, sometimes I feel like, Senior Officer Giap and all of his talents and skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a journey for those audits to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And you've seen the progress in real time, which is exciting. And when we need results like that in every aspect of MPS, And so it's encouraging to see that that's happening financially. Um, I'm sorry, did I cut you off? I didn't mean to.
No, do your most valuable. I'm ready.
Okay, so my most valuable moment is also extremely, extremely nerdy. Um, but I my most valuable moment was, yeah, hearing that the fund balance was it within policy compliance. And so what that really means is the district and or the board set policy that the fund balance, so essentially the district's saving account, needs to be within 8% or at least 8% of the entire budget. And for years and years and years, you know, boards have made different decisions for various reasons, whether it was responding to an emergency, or needing to close budget deficits, just doing different things like that. Um, and also just not thinking that we needed to have such a robust savings account when, students aren't getting the resources that they need in their classrooms. Um, they made they finally clawed their way back again under the leadership of Senior Officer Diop and the entire accounting and finance team to get back to compliance in that policy. And what and again, that's a very, very nerdy thing, like when you're just thinking about your savings account, but knowing that what we're going to be heading into in the next year, like that is huge news to know that we have recouped enough money to hopefully soften the impact of COVID on this year's finances and upcoming year's finances. And so I think it is a significant thing that needs to be acknowledged and celebrated. And I know the board members did a little bit of that last night, but I think it's just so important when you put into context that we were able to recoup enough money from last year to be able to soften the blow of what we're about to encounter this year.
Yeah. Again, right? The roller coaster of last night. So for my do better moment, now it's almost his last meeting. And so part of me didn't want to give Director Walzer more airtime, but then he said something that just made me so frustrated that it has to be my do better moment. It was a question that he asked about, so Senior Officer Giap made a comment that like, even if we increased our attendance, right, we wouldn't necessarily be free of budget issues. That's not the only formula. And he made a comment about like, it would take us having about 79,000 kids in attendance, right, in order for us to be completely funded. And Director Walzer's question, now, not his private question, not his question during the finance committee, not his question during his one-on-one, but his public question in front of his constituents was, does that mean that we're educating our current students of about whatever 30 to 35,000 with money that we could, like, are we basically spending double what we should be spending? And I was just so frustrated with, to me, it was like an insulting question. It showed a lack of due diligence. It showed a lack of basic understanding of the budget. I thought it was a little snarky. I thought it was a dig. It's not the first time I've seen Director Walzer take digs at GUP. And so that really frustrated me because like that kind of comment from a public seat and a public meeting could really cause confusion for people who haven't been following along. And that was, in my opinion, yet again, I clearly have some feelings about this. That was poor governance by Director Walzer. And I thought it was completely irresponsible question for that context.
Yeah, I think what is hard if you were just attending this meeting or just have started to attend the last few meetings, you would not understand the context maybe of that question. And it might have seemed like an innocuous question for a confused board member. But for the last 4 years, it has felt like Director Walzer has tried to undermine Senior Officer Diop. And this, again, one last meeting. By the way, the first meeting in 6 months maybe that Director Walzer did not go off task and start to talk about COVID or anything else, just talked about what was in the presentation. And it felt like to try to undermine Senior Officer Diop, which is very, very frustrating. And he has had a history of going after him for no reason. And I know other board members have said something to him. I have personally written emails about this. Other people have had lots of concerns about the treatment that Director Walzer has directed towards Senior Officer Giap. So totally in agreement with you on that. I'll say, as frustrating as that do better moment was, I'll say though that my do better moment is actually in spite of Director Walzer, because even though I did not like the way that he treated Senior Officer Giap, he did at least acknowledge the point that right now the district has to do things also in order to address the structural budget concerns. The problem is that he did not listen to Senior Officer Giap when it comes to enrollment is not going to be the only way to solve this problem. And so my do better moment really was, it's the conversation about the budget centered so heavily on the need to create an additional funding from the state. And I 100% understand like the need for additional revenue. And I think it's important that the state does figure out ways to, one, soften the blow for districts that they're going to experience due to COVID, and then also ensure that we're keeping up with the rate of inflation and properly funding special education and properly funding English language learners, right? Like these are things that our state really needs to do. And our board needs to figure out what is within their control and actually govern with what's in their control to fix. Year after year after year, and including last night, the finance team, Senior Officer Giap, has told the board that we have structural issues in our budget that we need to address. And that was no part of the conversation. There wasn't any questions about what are some opportunities to fix our structural issues, other than like we just need more money from the state to fill in our special education gap. And so it doesn't feel like the board is still ready to take that on and figure out what's within their control to address the structural concerns within the budget. And I think we all have thoughts around like what is it going to take for the district to at least be on steady ground, so that we're not looking ahead towards years and years of deficits, which is what was shared last night. And so that's my do better moment. I hope that we can start to have honest conversations, hard conversations. I know it's not the thing that's going to get you reelected, starting those conversations, but do we need to start to have conversations about potentially closing schools, and what does that mean, and how do we do that in an equitable way? So that's my do better moment.
And one thing I'll say on the end of that is we know that in a system that is inherently racist, if we don't talk about cuts with mindfulness and in advance, that typically and historically marginalized children and students and families receive the brunt of those cuts by default. And so as much as it makes us uncomfortable to talk about some of the things, it feels so clearly that the writing is on the wall. My concern is if that we avoid it, then we default back to racist decision making with really horrific implications toward students who need the most right now.
Yeah. And that's such a great point to wrap up and tee to our longer video. So if you want to hear more about this discussion, check out our longer debrief video. But thanks for listening. Thanks, Heather.
Bye.